I felt a general distaste for the happy ending, purely because obviously that just doesn't happen in life. So I was like, well, if this is something that's so unsatisfying, a lot of us talk about the fiction and the fantasy versus reality, why do we keep responding so deeply to these constructed narratives? So it was really with that kind of aim that I went to investigate it, to essentially find out not necessarily how we told them or anything else other than why. Like, why were they so dominant as a form of communication? The idea we landed on was how to tell a story that doesn't adhere to any of the rules. So can you still maintain the satisfaction that we get from storytelling without adhering to they're rather restrictive, and they demand certain things that I just felt were very useless. So that was the main focus of the research. It required a lot of reading, and a lot of the research ended up probably on stage with a lot of testing and going, does this work?
Yeah.
Can you tell a story like this, or do people just hate you at the end? So that was this second stage of development, and then in between that we were taking small excerpts from the piece and performing it at like cut and paste, and because the idea at the end of that 6 months wasn't quite refined enough. We had like a real soul of a piece and no way to get it across to an audience. It was just thoroughly confusing. Beautiful, I think, but thoroughly confusing to most people. So we kind of found this way of telling the anti-story, but we hadn't found a way of landing it with an audience. So the last 18 months was testing tiny pieces of that, finding the style, because we were struggling with style. And then the last phase was sitting down and writing the script, and that was what cemented this piece that you've seen here. And then audience responses thus far have been kind of that thing we were originally aiming for, was the anti-story that still allowed you to connect in the same way that the narrative does. Mm. So we're basically geniuses, pretty much. Yeah.
I like it. Yeah, totally.
So then,
but that moment,
by operating within a fantasy setting, you can actually get away with creating new truths. So because I was appearing as a woman in horns, I didn't have to behave as a regular human. I could speak in a very poetical way, or I could present really complex ideas, and people were really willing to take that on because I wasn't trying to be a philosopher, you know, expounding these ideas. So that was a very concrete technique that we landed on quite early in order to communicate this idea of questioning. A lot of the more poetic dialogue comes through a mushroom, ironically. What's really interesting is people are much more willing to believe inanimate objects than you. You can get away with really profound statements through inanimate objects because you're not lying to people, you're admitting that what I'm doing is play and it's a game, and so they get invested in that, and then they can come up with their own rules of how it speaks or how that game is played.
Funnily enough, one of the first reviews that came out for this piece for this season talked about the show being very honest and simple, and that's not how we view the work at all. Thought it was quite complex, but apparently not. But I think in terms of, I mean, I guess as an audience member, encountering someone who is, for the most part, talking directly to them, there's something very raw about that, I suppose. So, you know, I guess from that point of view, it is quite a open or honest show.
A lot of people are responding by really engaging in the questions we pose and asking us, who was this, what was this, I thought that was this, I thought when the mushroom spoke it was actually representing him, and to feel them engaging in that story in such a way where they start turning to their partner and going, did you get the same thing? That was pretty much exactly what we were aiming for, was that people were invested enough in it that they wanted to know what the story was and that they had enough room to start making their own. But particularly I was really excited when people started identifying it as a journey of loneliness and isolation and of acceptance of that. So in terms of like this idea of communicating, that was a really exciting thing to feel that had been communicated, I guess.
Yeah.